In this lesson, we'll continue a review of PSAT Reading Test 2, Section 1. We're now on the fifth and final passage. This is the second science passage. It's adapted from Ed Yong, Gut Bacteria Allows Insect Pest to Foil Farmers, published in 2013 by National Geographic Society. If you recall, always two science passages on the PSAT and SAT. One, in my opinion, is a little bit of a softer science, not so much technical language, more just describing like habits or patterns of animals or nature. And here, this in my opinion is the more technical, the more hard science, because there's lots of, it's a little bit more difficult to follow in my opinion. Also, we see terms like cysteine protease, and it's the genetic differences that get the gut bacteria of these rootworms. And so I assume you wrote this passage. It's about the western corn rootworm, a beetle that's a serious pest of corn in the U.S. And the adults have strong preferences for laying eggs in corn so that their underground larvae hatch into a feast of corn roots. And this is part of this cycle. And it's really a difficult problem for farmers. And so what they've done is they've used this dependency against the rootworm by planting soybean and corn in alternate years. Remember, they have a preference for laying their eggs in corn, and so they would hatch in corn as well, but they've rotated the crops, and that means that the rootworms lay their eggs in cornfields, but the larvae hatch in soybean and die. But then it goes on, we've got this rotation resistant rootworm that they can actually anticipate this alternate planting, and they lay their eggs in soybean and they hatch in corn. And then it goes on just really describing this difficulty, and then toward the end they finally determined what really makes them resistant. It's not the rootworms themselves, but the bacteria in their gut. So again, I assume you've read it. Let's take a look at the questions. The first one, 39, it's a general question. Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts. Again, you may want to return to this. We'll just do this in order. But in the beginning, it's really describing the problem, right? This rootworm, and the farmers have tried to combat it unsuccessfully. But then they list the cause, that the bacteria is in their gut, and then they find the solution. And so the answer for this one, let's take a look. Is it a statement about the challenges posed by an insect to an indication of why that challenge was easy? It certainly wasn't easy to overcome. It took a long time. They didn't figure it out at first. Summary of a once unexplained natural phenomenon to a biography of the scientist who researched. This is not about the biography. I mean, that's not the main theme. Description of a problem affecting agriculture. This looks good so far. To an explanation of how the scientists identified the cause, right? This is the answer. The problem, the rootworm, finally identifying the cause, the bacteria in the gut. The answer is C. All right, let's take a look at question 40. The statement zoology is ecology. What does this serve to do? This is a function question. So let's take a look at line 6. And here it's the beginning of the passage. Well, let's just go read the beginning. Here is a lesson that we're going to be taught again and again in coming years. Most animals are not just animals, they're a collection of microbes. If you really want to understand animals, you have to understand the world of microbes inside them. In other words, zoology is ecology. And then it goes on to state, right, this is not just about the study of animals. That's what zoology is, but it's really stating ecology is really the study of organisms and how they relate. And specifically, this passage was about the bacteria in their guts, the microbes, and they're a collection of microbes. So it's not just the study of animals. And so what does this phrase mean? Zoology is ecology. Let's take a look at the answer choices. Propose that two scientific areas of knowledge must be merged. This is definitely not right. Point out that knowledge obtained in one field will lead to expertise in another. You know, this one is tempting, I think. And by the way, I think this is a hard question, but it's not really saying that will lead to expertise. That's too specific. It's not quite accurate. Assert a point about a biological science that is supported by an example in the past. It's kind of a broad answer, but this is correct, right? The point is that biological science, it's not just the study of animals. If you really want to understand them, they're a collection of microbes, and you have to study the ecology here. This one is the answer. I think this was a tough question, by the way, just my opinion here, and I think it was ranked a difficult question. So a little bit more difficult. Again, stay away from ones that are just not quite accurate. This is just a general answer, and it's correct. All right, let's take a look at 41. According to the passage, one similarity between the rotation-resistant rootworms and the normal rootworms is that they both. And so we're looking for some clues about rotation-resistant and just the normal rootworms. So going back to the passage, we know that the normal rootworms, they have this preference, right? So the preference of the rootworm for laying eggs in cornfields. We know that. But then the farmers anticipated that. They alternated the crops, but then there's this rotation-resistant females. They lay their eggs among soybean fields, right? And the alternate year, the larvae hatch in a field of corn. So what do they both have in common? Well, you should recognize that both of them are trying, they want the larva to hatch in a feast of corn roots, right? The rotation-resistant does it another way, but that's what they both have in common. Let's look at the answers here. Reduce crop productivity by extracting nutrients from the soil. This is just way off. Produce larvae that feed on the plant roots of crops. Yeah, this is it. They don't mention corn, but this is definitely the answer here, right? Larvae that feed on the plant root of crops. So it's B. And let's take a look at 42. Which choice most clearly indicates how some rootworms have overcome farmers' efforts to eradicate? And we kind of mentioned this earlier. The rootworms, they anticipate this alternate year, so they would lay their eggs in soybean, right? We already read this as around line 18, right? Rootworms have adapted the strategy by reducing their strong instincts for laying eggs in corn, right? That's their tendency. But now they lay the rotation-resistant females their eggs among soybean fields, so the alternate year the larvae hatch in a crop of corn. And so this answer here, again, we had sort of mentioned that one. So the answer for 42, it is 18 to 20. Let's just go back and look, right? That was 18 to 20. Yes, okay. It's a little bit hard when I'm doing it on the screen. And we'll do one more question and then we'll stop this video. We'll do question number 43. The central claim of the fourth paragraph is what? So another function question, they're giving us direction. We look at the fourth paragraph and what is the claim? And so that's 23 to 35. Again, this is how they're describing the problems and how the rotation-resistant rootworms had overcome this, the alternating plant crops in different years. There are certainly genetic differences that separate the rotation-resistant rootworms from their normal peers, but what are they? Researchers at the University of Illinois have been studying the problem since 2000, and despite generating a vast amount of data, they have failed to find the genes in question. The western corn rootworm has been an enigma for a long time. It has the ability to practically adapt to all control methods deployed against it, including crop rotation. After many years of research about the mechanisms of rotation resistance, results were mostly inconclusive. So this is really just, this whole paragraph is saying despite efforts that they just couldn't find a solution here, right? An enigma, a mystery, the results were inconclusive. And so for question 43, extensive study of rootworms genes was insufficient to determine why some rootworms are rotation resistant, right? They didn't have an answer. The answer here is A.